Shavua Tov. It's so meaningful to be here at the Vayichan Avas Yisrael program, especially a few days before Tisha B'Av, when we all want to be working on togetherness and Achdut. So today I want to talk about the concept of mourning, and I want to zero in specifically on the idea of crying. Everybody's heard the term a crybaby. In fact, we sometimes even use the word a crybaby to refer to an adult, not a baby. An adult who seems to be crying excessively or crying over something that other people don't deem significant. They're called a crybaby. And probably every child has heard the word, don't cry over spilled milk. Why not? Because the milk is on the floor. And there's no way to get that milk back into the bottle. So what's the point of crying? It's ineffective, and it's a waste of time and energy. There's no way that it's going to fix the problem. So why are you wasting your time and energy crying? But it's interesting because Judaism does tend to value crying. You know, you pick up a Sefer Tehillim and there's watermarks in the Sefer, in the Tehillim, because the person who was saying Tehillim was crying. And we look at that as something positive. Or somebody will tell over how they spoke to a Rav and they told the Rav their problems, and the Rav was so with them as they were speaking that the Rav cried along with them, and that's looked at as praiseworthy. Or I remember hearing about one of the great mashgichim here in Eretz Yisrael, that every year when he would hear the parsha being read in shul about Mechiras Yosef, about the selling of Yosef, he would cry, even though the story happened thousands of years ago and he knew the end of the story, and yet he still cried because he was an emotional, sensitive person that allowed himself to feel what he was hearing. In fact, I once read a tragic essay written by a young man who left a frum lifestyle. He grew up in a frum home, and then he ended up leaving Yiddishkeit. And he describes how in the process of his journey, one Tisha B'Av, he went to the Kosel, and he saw people sitting around on the plaza in front of the Kosel, and they were crying. And he could not relate to their tears. And then he ended up leaving the Kosel, and leaving Yerushalayim, and leaving Yiddishkeit. And he said, but from when I left, I never cried again in public. He said, sometimes maybe I cried in my room with the door closed. But the idea of crying in public, crying together, of admiring tears and crying, of looking at tears and crying as something valuable, is something that's uniquely Jewish. And I wanted to analyze the idea of crying with you, because, you know, there's this concept of istakal ba'oraisa ubara alma, that Hashem looked into the Torah and used the Torah as a blueprint with which to create the world. What that means on a very deep level is that the physical world and the spiritual world match each other with exquisite exactitude. And by analyzing the physical world, we get a window into the spiritual world. So what is crying? So when we cry, water comes out of our eyes. Why are our eyes the vehicle that expresses this deep emotion? And why water? The pasuk says, Eini yorda mayim. My eyes were pouring out tears. Why does water come out of our eyes when we're sad? And the third aspect of crying is that when a person cries, sounds come out of their mouth. So I want to try and understand these three ideas, that why the eyes, why water from our eyes, and why sounds from our mouths. So it's interesting that in our sources, the sense of sight is considered the highest of our senses. It's also highest on our body. And it's the one that gives us the greatest access to truth. Sight allows us to access an absolute objective truth that exists outside of us, in contrast, for example, to hearing. Because when you hear something, at any given second, you only hear one teeny tiny syllable. So what the listener has to do in order to understand the speaker is they have to string together all those little sounds to create meaning. Hearing is a participatory, cooperative venture. Sight, on the other hand, allows us access to something that is objective and absolute and exists outside of ourselves. And that's why at Har Sinai, we're told that Ra'u et kolot, we saw the sounds. The revelation had such incredible clarity that it was 100% clear. Even the hearing was sight. Of course, we live in a world, an alma de shikra, a world of falsehood, or one could say a world of Photoshop. And therefore, we really can't trust our eyes to really give us access to this objective absolute truth, even though theoretically that is what eyes do. And that's why, for example, when we say Shema, the halacha is that we cover our eyes with our hands. Why is that? Because Shema is talking about the unity of Hashem. But if I open my eyes, I'm not going to see the unity of Hashem. If you look out at the world, you don't see unity. You see diversity. You see separation. You don't see Hashem's unity. So we cover our eyes because we're in an Alma de Shukra, because we are in a false world. But at the same time, we're aware that when you see something, seeing something, we know the famous line, a picture is worth 1,000 words, because a picture gives you access to something external to you, something absolute that exists outside of you. What about tears? So tears are water. And water, we know, the Maharal points out that the word for water, mayim, is in plural. And the reason for that is because water represents the idea of an amorphous, flowing entity that has no borders. There's no definite piece of water. Water doesn't exist in the singular. Water is part of a whole, and it flows over borders. It doesn't differentiate. Water also is used as an expression of our deepest innermost self. There's the pasuk, Shivchi kamayim libech, pour your heart out like water. It's not necessarily talking about formal prayer so much as a person's essence, their deep inner self, pouring out towards Hashem. Water is used always to wash away a particular status and to create a place for something new and different. For example, Noach and his sons and their families, the entire world had deteriorated to an incredibly low level, and only Noach and his sons and their families were deemed worthy to continue in a new world. And Hashem brought a flood which washed away the old entity and allowed the new entity to be established. And also with Mitzrayim, there's so many mitzvos that remind us of the fact that we were in Mitzrayim, because there was something about the mindset of Mitzrayim that we had to be in it and then we had to leave it completely. So we were in Mitzrayim and then we left Mitzrayim, and the Egyptian army came running after us, and we came to the Yam Suf, and the waters split for us and we went to the other side, and then the waters washed over this powerful, enormous, strong Egyptian army, washed them away completely, and we were able to come out the other side, a nation where the whole status of Egyptianness was washed away from us, and now we were ready to receive the Torah. The same concept applies with the mikvah, that a person goes into the mikvah with a particular status, and the water washes away that status and allows them to come out of the mikvah in a different status completely. A person goes in as tameh, comes out as tahar, or a person goes into the water as a non-Jew, and that status is washed away, and they come out of the water as a Jew. And let's talk about the sounds that come out of our mouth when we cry. So the word for crying, bechi, shares a root with the word navoch, which means confused. When we cry, we use our mouths, the very organ that's purpose is to be coherent and articulate. Sounds come out of our mouth that make no sense. That's what crying is. And when do we cry? We tend to cry at night. The Gemara says that when a person hears somebody crying at night, they'll tend to join in with that crying, because nighttime is conducive to crying. The very word for night, Laila, shares the letters with the word Yilala, which means a crying out. It's dark at night, and dark is confusing. Our sense of sight is taken away, and the clarity and the can-do and the optimism of the day disappear. So night is conducive to confusion, and it's conducive to crying. So why is Judaism into crying? And not just into crying, but into mourning. And the whole concept of Avelus is really that you shouldn't be Mesiach HaSadas. The whole concept of mourning is that you're supposed to focus on the mourning. The halachos of the 3 weeks and the 9 days are taken from the halachos of a mourner. And when a person's sitting Shiva, you're not supposed to say hello to them, and you're not supposed to start a conversation with them until they start talking. And all the other halachos that include, no going to weddings, or no going swimming, or no doing laundry, or no washing. It's all in order to focus our energies directly onto the reason that we're mourning. Why do we want to focus on that? Why isn't mourning similar to crying over spilled milk? Okay, something happened. It happened. There's nothing to do about it. Why do we want to keep on thinking about it? Why don't we just pick ourselves up and move on with life? There's a beautiful line in the Meshech Chochmah that gives us an insight into what this mourning is about. And the Meshech Chochmah says, "Shekol davar hanervad shtut livkot." He says it's 100% true. Something that is lost and cannot be recovered, it's silly to cry over it. Rak al davar habilti miyuash v'yesh tochelet shayach livkot. Only for something which you have not despaired over, only something that there is hope for, is there any point in crying. We don't cry over spilled milk. We cry over milk that can still be put back in the bottle. What does that mean? It's fascinating that the word avelos has the root aleph beis lamed, which spells the word aval, which means but. What is avelos? Avelos was when a person cries, and he says he's crying because this is very sad, but it's not the end of the story. Yes, this person died, but there will be Tchiyas HaMesim, or but the Neshama still lives. Yes, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, but Mashiach will come. Paradoxically, we mourn and we cry because we are eternal optimists. We believe this is not the end of the story, which is another aspect of Judaism which stands in complete contrast to Western society. And that is that we are optimistic and we are hopeful and we believe in happy endings. Western society does not like crying, does not like mourning, and it tends towards the cynical. There's children's stories often end with the line, "and they lived happily ever after." And a sophisticated adult is supposed to smirk at such a line. They lived happily ever after. Whoever lives happily ever after? We know that life is really not cotton candy. But we do believe in happy endings. We believe there will come a time where the lion will lie down with the sheep. We believe a time will come where the nations will beat their swords into plowshares. We believe there will come a time when the world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. And this belief in Mashiach is not a little footnote in Judaism. Rambam says very clearly that a person can do all the mitzvos. They can keep Shabbos and kosher and put on tefillin and do everything a Jew is supposed to do and not talk Lashon Hara. And if they don't believe in the coming of Mashiach, they're called a kofir. They're called a heretic. Why is it so important to believe in happy endings? Why aren't we a little bit cynical? We've gone through so much. Why are we so optimistic? Why do we mourn with this idea of aval, it's not the end? Paradoxically, we mourn because we are optimists. There's a saying that people say all the time nowadays, it is what it is. But a Jew doesn't believe that it is what it is. It is not what it is. Yes, we look out and it's dark and we cry and inarticulate sounds come out of our mouths, but the tears wash our eyes and make room for us to be able to access a truth that we're waiting still to see. Zechariah Hanavi calls us Asirei Tikva, prisoners of hope. It sounds like an oxymoron. If you're a prisoner, you don't have hope. And if you have hope, you're not a prisoner. What does it mean to be a prisoner of hope? What it means is that you're living in a cynical world, a world that doesn't believe in happy endings, a world that thinks that crying is silly and ineffective. And we, on the other hand, are optimistic, and we do believe in miracles, and we mourn because we believe that this is not the whole story. Yes, it's sad. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's painful. But we believe that our eyes will soon merit to see something entirely different. We're prisoners of hope. Everybody else is comfortable, and yet our eyes are pinned to the door, waiting for something to happen. We can't relax in our train seat and watch the scenery. We're constantly looking to see when this geula is going to come. We're in a state of constant yearning. Rabbeinu Yonah brings a beautiful mashal. So he tells a story of a king putting 10 prisoners into a dungeon as punishment for something that they did wrong. And the prisoners find a way to dig a tunnel in the dungeon, and 9 of them escape to freedom. And there's 1 prisoner left in the dungeon, and the jailer comes into the dungeon, and he sees that 9 of them has escaped, and he starts beating the 1 prisoner that's left in the dungeon. And the prisoner looks at him and says, "Why are you beating me? I'm the good one. Go find those 9 people that ran away and beat them. They were the ones that escaped. I'm the good guy that stayed in the dungeon. I don't deserve a punishment." And the jailer looks at him and he says, "No, you are the one that deserves the punishment." Because what is the purpose of putting you in a dungeon? The purpose of putting you in a dungeon is that you should realize that this is not the right kind of situation. I don't want to be here. I'm not in a good place. The king was trying to show you that there's a mistake here, there's a problem here, that things are not the way they should be. And those other 9 prisoners understood that. And the minute there was a way to escape, they left as fast as they could. But you, Mr. Prisoner, the fact that you're sitting here and you didn't escape when you had a chance to is a negation of the whole concept of jail. The reason the king put you into jail is he wanted you to understand that the situation is not ideal. By staying put and not taking your chance to escape, you're showing that you are fine in jail, that the jail is sababa for you. So what's the nimshal? The nimshal is that we're in Gullus. And as long as we are happy here, things get a little uncomfortable, so we turn up the air conditioning, we pipe in some nice music, we're negating the whole concept of Gullus. The purpose of Gullus is to realize that there's a problem here, to yearn for a change, to mourn, and to let our eyes be washed over with tears so that we can open our eyes to see a new reality. The pasuk in Eicha says, "Al Eila ani buchia, Eini yorda mayim." I'm crying, tears are pouring out of my eyes. But Yeshayahu Hanavi, in describing the final geula, says, "Ki ayin ba'ayin yir'u b'shuv Hashem Tzion." May we be zocha to see that geula very soon and in our time. Thank you for listening.
Mitzvah